And that brings us to a second competing theory of humor, the incongruity theory, which claims that humor involves taking delight in some sort of departure from a regularity or norm. So when you're expecting something to happen and something incongruous happens instead. This can include surprise and randomness and absurd humor and subverted expectations. And this explains why puns are funny, because puns are where you expect it to go one way, but the punchline brings about a pleasantly surprising reversal of meaning that induces that humorous reaction. So superiority theory couldn't explain why we find puns funny, but it can be explained by incongruity theory of humor. So according to this theory, the humor comes in that moment of realization of incongruity between what we expect to happen and what actually happens. So take, for example, the image on the slide of a famous painting of dogs playing poker. That's so incongruous because you wouldn't expect them to play poker. They're dogs. They can't sit on chairs that way and know the rules of poker and play all serious and have opposable thumbs to hold cards in their hands. That's where the humor comes from. It's taking something out of its usual context and then putting it into a completely different context where it doesn't fit, it doesn't make sense, and the humor comes in the nonsense. So humor of this kind is the amusement that springs from things being out of order and being taken out of their allotted role in the overall scheme of things. So we laugh when something suddenly seems out of place, when things go off the rails, because such comedy represents a momentary break from the overbearing logic of the world and its insistence on rationality and everything in its proper place. And we can escape from meaning and just get lost in nonsensibility. And I can demonstrate this theory of humor by again playing a classic in internet history, a piece of art called Zombie Kid Likes Turtles.
Back here live at the Waterfront Village with my friend the zombie, Jonathan. You're looking good. Jonathan just got an awesome face paint job. What do you think?
I like turtles.
All right, you're great zombie. And good times here at the Waterfront Village, open for the next 11 days.
So whether he knows it or not, Zombie Kid is demonstrating incongruity theory of humor. The news reporter is asking the kid a question and expecting some sort of normal or logical answer, something within the realm of reason based on the question she asked. And instead he throws her a massive curveball and says something completely incongruous to what the reporter or anyone in the audience was expecting. And the humor comes from how unexpected and random his response was. So this also explains why we enjoy impersonations, because they involve one person assuming the voice and mannerisms of another person. And that's incongruous. It's taking something out of its usual role in the order of things and putting it in a different place, putting it out of place. It also explains why we enjoy absurd humor and surreal humor, because it presents us with so many incongruities. Or sarcasm is again incongruous, because there's incongruity between the thing you're saying, the content of your speech, and how you're saying it, the style of your speech. This also explains the popularity of the oldest joke in the book, why did the chicken cross the road? Because that setup for the joke sets you up to expect something ridiculous. Because the setup is so ridiculous, why did the chicken cross the road? That you expect a crazy answer. But then when the answer is just the logical conclusion that it was just to get to the other side of the road, the humor comes from that subverted expectation between your expectation of a ridiculous outcome and the surprisingly logical outcome instead. That's called an anti-joke because it's playing with the conventions of joke telling itself. So this brings me to the point that in order for the incongruity of a joke or something to be recognized as incongruous, there has to be a pre-existing understanding of what it means to be congruous in that situation. You can't recognize something as being incongruous or unexpected if you don't already have an expectation of what's supposed to happen. When there isn't a preset expectation of what's supposed to happen, then when something incongruous does occur, it's not going to have any surprising or humorous impact. In order to subvert expectations, you must first set expectations. So for example, you expect a baby to talk and act like a baby. So there's no surprise when a baby acts that way because it aligns with your expectations of that figure. But let's say your dentist started talking like a baby while they were performing oral surgery on you, or a politician started talking like a baby during an important political speech. More humor would be generated in those situations from the incongruity between what's expected of certain social roles and how they are actually performed. So a lot of humor comes from an incongruous coupling of two things that usually don't go together. So here's another example. A patient asks their doctor, "How long have I got to live?" The doctor says 10. The patient asks, 10 what? 10 years? 10 months? 10 weeks? The doctor says, no. 10, 9, 8, 7. So doctors have a social role where they're expected to have a professional demeanor and compassionate bedside manner. But the punchlines of many doctor jokes typically involves them being shockingly insensitive when dealing with their patients. And the humor comes from the unprofessional, brutal insensitivity of a figure who occupies a social role where the expectation is that they never do or say something like this to a patient in real life. So there's some debate amongst incongruity theorists over whether the humor comes from the expectation generated by incongruities or the relief that occurs when the expectation is resolved. And I'll show another clip that'll let us discuss the sides of this debate.
Mike, what is your deal, man?
Oh, come on, man. You've been riding me all day.
Mike, you're playing like Betty White out there.
That's not what your girlfriend said.
Baby! Eat a Snickers. Better?
Better.
I'm all bad!
That hurt. You're not you when you're hungry. Snick.
So first of all, I must say Betty White's delivery of that line, "Oh, come on, man, you've been riding me all day," is just pitch perfect. Betty White's a national treasure for a reason. But some proponents of incongruity theory of humor would say that it's not funny until the incongruity is resolved, until Betty White eats the Snickers bar and returns to her original form. I would personally disagree with that. I found it funny before it even got to that point of her transforming back. And I think it would be even funnier if she tried eating the Snickers bar and didn't transform back as expected. It would be hilarious if things just got further and further off the rails and everyone started panicking because he just continued being Betty White even after eating the Snickers bar. And his girlfriend is like, okay, am I just supposed to date Betty White for the rest of my life now? And it shows them in couples therapy years down the road and Betty White is still Betty White. I think that would be even funny if it just descends further and further into madness. And just as there are plenty of objections to and